So we should have more people in society?
Sure. But I don't know if this is connected to birth rate.
Well, yeah, because the more people in society would then back up what you're arguing, right? But don't we need more husbands and wives to have more people?
Yeah, I just don't think these things are mutually exclusive.
How can a wife be a CEO and also raise the kids?
Tampons, birth control, like support.
So tampons and birth control raise the kids? What do you mean?
Lots of women find a way to both raise children and work.
Well,
shared parenting, like the husband takes roles. Sometimes they get babysitters. Sometimes there's intergenerational families. There's multiple ways that women share the load of parenting.
So that's a net good?
It can be, yeah.
Okay.
Freedom of opportunity.
What is the standard for good here?
Do you mean like at an epistemic level?
At any level.
Good as in
your worldview, what determines the good?
So in the case of what we're talking about, I talked about the innovator scale. So the reason I like women being able to have access to opportunity is because it improves GDP.
Okay, so the net good for society is just what? More fiat money? Like what determines that?
Yep, GDP is a good thing. Do you disagree?
Yeah, I do.
You don't think
first
GDP
of all,
is good?
like what if the money is a scam?
That doesn't have anything to do with GDP. Why would not having more GDP for a country not be good?
The nature of the money itself, if the money system is a debt-based scam, doesn't have anything to do with GDP?
Not really, because GDP is about like the income of a country, right? So like debt is part of how you navigate income of a country.
Right, but our country's income is presently based on pure debt, right? Is that a bad thing?
Our GDP is not based on debt, no.
It is. Well, the whole system is based on debt. Gross domestic product is not itself debt. I'm saying the economic system itself is based on debt.
Yeah, like
because
like
it's
MTN.
a debt-based system.
Yeah, like modern theory of like money is very debt organized. It's just like debt is not this like boogaloo scary thing in and of itself.
No. I'm talking about our system is fiat. It's not attached to anything hard. There's no hard currency that our money is attached to since the shock doctrine of Nixon, right? So Nixon goes off the gold standard. So we're now a debt-based system. So I'm just saying your highest quality was the best GDP in society. So your organizing principle is a neoliberal economic theory. So what I want to know is, even if that's itself based on debt, then what's the source of the good here?
So in this case, what is good for society is having a competitive GDP so that your enemies can't stomp you.
That's the highest good?
That's not the highest good. That's the good of what I'm talking about in the case of women entering in.
What is the highest good that determines that that's good?
Are you talking about morality?
Just at all. In your system, you tell me what your system's standard of good is.
So I'm not really sure why we're having the epistemic conversation.
Why not?
Because it feels like we're losing the plot of the conversation.
No, I want to know what your standard of the good is.
Again, what do you mean by good?
You said that the GDP is necessarily attached to the highest good.
I didn't say highest good. I said it's a good thing.
Okay, then I'm asking you what the highest good is that determines that the GDP is better than not caring about GDP.
So you're asking for my moral foundation theory?
Sure.
I'm a divine command theorist.
From what divine command?
The Christian God.
And he says GDP is good?
No.
Did Moses come down and talk about that?
I don't think GDP is moral.
You just said it was the highest good
I didn't say it was the highest good.
This debate.
No, I said it's good for society.
Then it's moral if it's good.
I don't think it's moral in this case.
If it's good, it's moral.
Well, you can have good as in
good
functional.
is a moral claim.
Well, of course, you can have functional claims, right?
So if it's only functional or if it's only pragmatic, then it's not ultimately a good. It's just subjective.
So at a functional level, it is, I guess, do you disagree with this idea that it's good for a state to have competitive high GDP?
It could be, but I don't think it's the highest good, and I have a standard of good. So I'm trying to figure out what yours is.
Well, what's more important for a nation state than GDP?
The health of the society.
Sure, but if the health of society is really high...
I mean, could you have, let me give you an example. Could you have a society that's mass addicted to drugs, but has a good number, a nice income?
Probably not.
No, you can have societies that are full of detriment, like full of ghettos, and they're ruled over by organized crime that make a lot of money.
Typically, those countries, like if you're thinking about like the Congo or like areas that have like high levels of corruption, their GDP is horrible because typically crime is not good for GDP.
But I'm saying you could conceivably have that. It doesn't matter whether there's some exception to that rule somewhere.
It's not
in the
exception.
Congo.
I would say the rule is, in general, when you have lots of corruption and drug addiction, it's not good for GDP.
But I'm saying conceivably you could have a ruling elite that makes a lot of money from drugs, and the society itself is living in shantytown, right?
I don't think that nation state would have high GDP. I don't think there's any evidence.
It doesn't matter if you think that, because it's conceivable that you could have that, right? You could have a successful oligarchy that makes a lot of money, and the people themselves don't do very well.
Are you talking about like Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, but Saudi Arabia, again, is not nearly as competitive as somewhere like America or any NATO country.
Well, again, how do we know that competitiveness for women is a good? You've just said that that's the case because it increases GDP.
So I'll just break it down.
It's a circle.
It's okay. If we're going to do
what?
We can do Agrippa's trilemma. It's just useless. I can use it at you too, right?
Well, but if I'm arguing for a moral ought on the basis of
this is not a moral ought.
It is. You said it's a good. If you said something is a good,
I said it's functional.
Yeah,
what word? Okay, we're doing chatter.
So
what
now
word do you want me to use when I say functional?
No. In a debate, if you're arguing for your position, then you're necessarily arguing that we ought to follow your position.
Yeah, I think I said it's a necessity and an unavoidable. That doesn't mean it's an ought. It doesn't mean it's a moral claim. It would be like realpolitik.
Well, then it's an ought, because do you think we ought to follow your arguments?
Not all oughts are moral.
Ought we follow your arguments?
As in, like, should you do what I prescribe for society?
Ought we follow the true arguments versus the false arguments?
Sure.
Okay. Then you're using an ought right now to argue for your position.
Sure, but this isn't a moral claim.
You just argue that we ought to follow your position. That's
it's still not a moral claim.
It is.
It's not.
Oughts are morals if you're extending them to everybody in the theoretical realm of listening to the debate.
Do you think that it's moral or not moral to have GDP? Do you think GDP is moral?
I'm pointing out that your position...
Could you answer my question this time?
I have a different system than you, so it's not going to apply to my system.
Do you think that GDP is moral?
Everything in life is conceivably or potentially moral.
How is GDP moral?
Because you extended it to, in this argument, the highest good.
I did not.
You walked it back after I asked for the highest good.
No.
Yes, you did.
I did not. I said for a nation state, I guess it's like one of the higher goods. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's not the highest good. And I've said...
Okay, so, and what is the good?
Jay, I don't know how to explain to you over and over that this is not a moral claim. It's realpolitik.
You're saying that?
It's pragmatism.
You're saying that, but ought we follow your argument in pragmatism here?
If you want a flourishing society by and large.
So we ought, logically.
Sure, but
ought we logically?
It's not a moral claim.
It's not.
Is GDP a moral claim?
It can be, depending upon the system.
How is GDP a moral claim?
In your system, you're arguing that what you just said we ought to follow your arguments.
I don't know how many times to tell you this.
Yeah, but
I'm not
you're
making
confused.
a moral claim.
You are,
I'm
and
not.
you're saying you're not.
You're just keep telling me that I am.
Anytime you say that there's an ought...
That's not true.
That is true.
No.
It is.
No.
Even if you redefine it as functional...
Okay, how about this? You don't have to have a liberal society that has a high GDP. You're just going to get stomped and you'll be a failed nation state. It's neutral morally.
Yeah, but you're missing the point about highest goods for society. You're arguing that...
I'm not engaging in that yet.
Wait, hold on.
Well, that's big. Go ahead.
Oh no, just if you guys can just try to let each other finish your thoughts. But go ahead.
So this debate necessarily comes down to metaphysical claims and epistemical claims and ethical claims.
No.
Yes, it does.
Because
feminism is about morals, ethics, biology, society, social relations. You can't divorce ethics from that. Now, if you think you can, I'm happy to address that, but that's just going to get you in an even deeper bind.
I'm not saying that you can't, that you can divorce these things. Of course, feminism
You just argued a minute ago that it's not moral.
GDP is not moral.
Then you can't divorce these things. So you just contradicted yourself.
So there are lots of elements. Okay. There are lots of elements within feminism that do make moral claims, right? Lots of them. When I'm talking about something like an innovator scale, it's not a moral claim. It's realpolitik.
I understand you think that, but I'm pointing out that it is still moral. That's the argument I'm making.
Okay. Do you want to engage with the actual conversation now?
You saying that doesn't avoid the argument I'm making.
Okay.
I know that's what you're trying to do.
Why is GDP not good for society, or is it?
I'm saying it depends on your standard of good, and that's what I'm asking you.
What's your standard of good? And
I think GDP can be great for a society, but it's not the highest good of society, such as the social cohesion of society. That's more important than who's making fiat money.
Okay. What do you think is the role of the nation state?
The nation state has the job and the duty to defend its people and to maintain a healthy society, to punish the wicked, and to reward virtue.
Sure, yeah, I would broadly agree. It's to keep its citizens safe, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, how does it do that at a foreign policy level?
But I said reward virtue and punish vice. So there's also necessarily an ethical component there.
Sure, that's your claim.
Right, that's my worldview.
Yeah, I'm just engaging with it.
Right.
Okay, so then how does your nation state and your worldview protect itself from enemies?
It has a standing army.
Okay, and how does it fund that standing army?
Well, nations have gone into debt, or they have been prosperous and used their own treasuries, or they have raised money to go to war. So there's a lot of different ways that could happen.
Okay, and so what do you think is the right way to do that?
It's an oversimplification question because not everything in regard to warfare or history of civilizations is necessarily right or wrong. It's a question of what might be the best or the worst. So there can be scales. It's not
Would you
all
say
either
that
or.
there are some things that aren't moral necessarily, some of them are just pragmatic, and then there's some things that are moral?
Everything could potentially be moral, but some things are pragmatic, sure.
Okay, that's basically what I've been saying.
Yeah,
So
but you
we
were
got there.
appealing to the good of a nation state.
You were, again, because you were using the word good in a way that I wasn't meaning it. And even though I clarified multiple times that I meant functional, and I even said, what word would you like me to use to
but
describe this
I
pragmatic
understand that
concept?
you think that saying that because it's functional, it removes the ethical domain, but it doesn't, is the point I'm trying to make. Because the
language-
question that we're debating is whether feminism is good for society or not. That's
Sure.
an ethical, moral
Okay,
claim.
so going back to the chatter thing, how we have to agree about words, okay? You're now essentially assigning to me what good means, and it's obvious that I'm not
No, I'm
agreeing
doing an
with
internal critique is what I'm doing. You know what that
You're
is?
assigning to me.
Do you know what an internal critique is?
Tell me.
So I'm criticizing your position on its own grounds. That's an internal critique. That's what happens in debates.
Okay, what word would you like me to use when I am describing this non-moral functional element that is
The
about
one
nation
that
state?
makes a non-moral position makes sense of why feminism is a good for society.
We can get there, but again, we have to.
You're not going to get there.
Well, we can, but you're not even like we're doing
Because-
chatter. We're literally we're doing
we're
the thing I
at
asked
the
not
point
to do.
where you don't understand the issue. That's the
That's
point.
not true. All you've done at this point is just like you're just weaponizing
No, you
Yes.
admitted that the debate is about whether feminism is good for society. That's a moral, ethical domain right there.
Sure, there are some moral elements.
So when you make
and
arguments
some
about
functional
GDP,
arguments.
if it's not moral, then it's not relevant to the debate.
It's absolutely moral. What language would
It's
you like
moral?
to use? I said it's not. There is moral elements and there are some non-moral elements. GDP
Is the debate today about something moral?
I don't know if I agreed to saying we're only going to talk about epistemics and morality. Good is, again, this word that we're basically doing chatter around, where you're assigning a label to it, and I haven't agreed to it.
I'm trying to figure out your position on the good.
My position on the good is it's holistic. There are things that are good because it's functional, and there are things that it's good because it's moral, right?
Is the debate today, feminism, about the good of the moral for society?
It's about, I guess, I would like to
Yes.
make the case for both.
The answer, okay. So
Functional
then
and
that
moral.
means that everything you've been saying for the last hour is wrong.
No, because I'm making a case for the functional element too.
But the fact that you're making the case for the functional element too doesn't matter if you're also talking about the moral.
You can make both arguments, and I would like
Correct.
to engage in the first
Yeah.
one.
Right, because the other one is the one I'm looking at, and that's the problem for you.
It's not the problem for me. The problem with this conversation is that essentially what you've done is you've assigned me a bunch of positions that I don't have.
No.
You've done a bunch of circle talk about words. You've done a couple of rhetorical flashbangs. And now we're stuck in the situation where we can't actually talk about the ideas, which is unfortunate because I was really
Because you've
looking
spawned
forward.
into you're chasing, like one foot is nailed, and then the other one is going in a circle, like a cartoon. You're
the
like
issue-
a
if you want-
cartoon
again,
character running in a circle.
If you want to like throw Agrippa's trilemma at me, you can, but I can throw it at you too. And if we do that, then there's no point. We're at an impasse. What do you think is good?
The good ultimately relates to God, the highest good.
Okay, the highest good. So is GDP in direction of that or not?
All things that exist are good in some way, and in some way relate to morals. But I do not believe that the GDP is the highest good for society.
Okay, what is the highest good for society?
The health and flourishing of the society, which has to exist within some kind of patriarchal norm. That's the only way that it can function.
Gotcha.
And the ones that don't, they dysfunction.
Okay. And so in your mind, does GDP contribute to any of that?
It's just one component of life, just like, I don't know, the size of the nation's landmass is one component.
Sure, I would agree with that.
But it's not the highest good.
Okay, gotcha.
So what's the argument that feminism is good for society?
Feminism is good for society at a functional level because it increases innovator scale. I also think it's the right thing to do.
That's moral oughts.
Yep, I'm giving you a moral claim now.
Okay, thank you. And why is it right for society?
It is right for society because I think in general we should try to treat others well, and I think limiting people's opportunity by force is bad for them. I don't think God wants that.
Okay, what God?
The Christian one.
Okay, where does he talk about this?
Forcing people to do things?
No, this idea of what the good is for society, because we have a lot of historical Christian societies.
Sure.
Were any of them feminist?
No, but I don't think in general that God advocates really strongly for a political system.
Really?
No.
What about when Israel was organized? Was that a political system? What did
Like
they have?
in 1948?
No, in the Old Testament.
In the Old Testament. Was it? It was a political society.
How was it organized?
I'm not a Jew.
What does that have to do with whether it was organized in a certain way or not?
It has nothing to do with my claim.
What does the Old Testament say about how God organized that society?
He gave them prescriptions about how to run their life from Moses.
How was that society organized?
It was organized, I believe, in a patriarchal society with matrilineal
correct.
heritage.
And it was a monarchy,
Yes.
a male monarchy.
Yep.
Okay. So in that regard, God was not feminist, right?
I've never said that God was feminist.
Well, I'm asking if there's a history example of where God organized a feminist society.
I mean, it's interesting because when you look at like ancient Judeo history, if you're not being presentist, it was like insanely progressive compared to like the pagans around them, like the Assyrians and Babylonians.
That's not what I'm asking.
Well, it is what you're asking.
You're calling
right?
it progressive, and I would just say it's healthy. So the fact that they,
Sure,
had,
yeah, like
they had the Ten
God
Commandments.
seemed to advocate to some degree for a better treatment of women than any other society
I
around
agree.
them.
But that's not feminism.
To some degree, you could argue that it is if you agree with my definition, which is like the empowerment.
Well, but your
and
definition is so
promotion of
elastic
femininity.
and broad that it could be anything
But you agreed
except
to
for
it.
what my position is. No, I don't, because I'm not agreeing that Old Testament patriarchal society is feminist. You just admitted it's not.
If you're not agreeing, why did we even define the words at the beginning of
Can you
Now you're
name a
just rejecting
feminist
them?
society
I'm not
that
interested
God
to.
advocated?
I'm not interested to.
You appealed to God.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to treat women well.
Did God ever? That's not feminism. Now you're equivocating.
I'm not equivocating.
Yes, you are.
How am I equivocating?
You're changing, moving the goalposts as to what feminism is.
That's a completely different
so
fallacy.
If God
So am I
has,
equivocating or am I moving? Hold on, am I equivocating or am I moving the goalpost now?
It's both.
It's
You're
both.
equivocating on the word and moving the goalpost to make your position work. So if there's no feminist,
not what
if there's no
equivocating
feminist equivocating on the word,
That's not what equivocating means.
I know what equivocation means. Yes, it does. It means that two different understandings of a word. You're equivocating on the word.
Okay.
Feminism, and you're defining to say that if God in the Old Testament gives women rights, that's feminism. That's not what feminism is. Feminism is a modern movement, post-revolutionary
Then why
philosophy.
did you agree to my definition of feminism?
Because it's so broad that that's fine if you want to defend that against patriarchy, but I'm arguing patriarchy against feminism,
So
and
all
what
you're
you
doing
appealed
now
to
is moving the goalpost by originally agreeing to a
no.
definition of feminism, and now you're saying that can't work anymore because it's defeating my argument?
The Old Testament God and the New Testament God are the same God, and they never institute a feminist society. And women's rights are being made in the image of God, that women are protected now in that status.
What do you mean
is
by a
not
feminist
feminism.
society? What do you mean by a feminist society?
A matriarchal society
I'm
or,
not
or
advocating
a
that.
non-patriarchal society.
I've never advocated for either of these things.
Okay, but feminism has never been a societal goal in the Old Testament or the New Testament or the history of any Christian society.
Again,
so you have no
I haven't
examples of
advocated-
this.
I haven't advocated for any of these things. I don't need
You
to.
appealed to God as your standard of the ought and
I
the
said it-
right, the moral right.
Yeah, it's a
right?
moral thing to treat
Correct.
women well.
And then I said, give me the examples of where that God ever instituted anything like what you're talking about in terms of feminism, and there's not. There's not.
There is, according to the definition you agreed to
No,
on
there's
feminism.
not.
Yeah, the empowerment and promotion of femininity. Judaism,
That is not what is happening in the Old Testament.
Judaism
That
is
is not.
the most progressive approach to femininity of all of the ancient
Modern rabbinic
religions.
Judaism is not the same thing as what's in the
But
Mosaic Law.
you asked for
You
Old
admitted-
Testament
you
examples, which
admitted
I
it-
just gave you one.
That's not rabbinic Judaism. You admitted that it's a patriarchal society that's
What
a
do you
monarchy.
mean it's not rabbinic? You don't think Old Testament Judeo is like
No, it's not.
it's not
different.
rabbinic? What are you talking talking about?
It's not the same thing as
You
rabbinic
don't think
Judaism.
that the 1200 BC society that was erected by King David wasn't a rabbinic society?
Rabbinic Judaism comes out of the 4th and 5th century when the Babylonian Talmud is collected and collated.
So you don't think that the Old Testament at
is
all
not rabbinic? No.
Okay.
And it's patriarchal. So even if it was rabbinic, it wouldn't
That's
refute
fine.
it. Then there's no examples of what you're talking about.
Well, the issue for me is that what you're doing is you're creating a false dichotomy. You're pretending like patriarchy and feminism can't coexist at the
Correct.
same
They
time.
cannot.
Of course they can. We live in one.
Being feminine is not the same thing as the movement of feminism.
I didn't say that it is. I said that
You
we
did.
are.
You said that femininity is promoted in the Old Testament, and you used that as a way to prove your position.
I said it empowered women and it promoted femininity. It empowered women by creating matrilineal lines of inheritance, and it promoted femininity by making a whole bunch of female figures be viewed as these like incredible characters to like look up to, like Ruth and Deborah and stuff like that.
Okay, well, there's
Which, according to the definition you agreed to on feminism, would be feminism.
Then it wasn't, quote, progressive according to your view, because other societies worship the goddess, and that would be more progressive than what you said.
If you want, we can go back an hour and we can redo chatter, and you can make a new definition for feminism that you like more, so that you can apply it more narrowly if you'd like.
You have moved the goalpost.
I have not. I wrote it down.
Feminism is.
I wrote it down,
to be
and you agreed to it.
anything that. So is the goddess feminism?
I don't know what the
Goddess worship in the ancient pagan world, is that feminism?
It might be.
Okay,
I'm not
thank
sure.
you.
I don't know anything
so your
about.
View,
Well, hold on.
So your position is so elastic that it could encompass any
Then
possible
why did
position.
you agree to it?
It's unfault because the way you framed it was anti-patriarchy, and I'm fine with that.
I didn't frame it that way.
Yes, you did.
I did not frame it that
the
way.
The terms of this debate
if you want to go back an hour,
is feminism good or is patriarchy good?
I wrote it down. Do you want to go back an hour?
The fact that you wrote it down just means that you misunderstand what you wrote down.
No.
That's even dumber.
The issue, rather than you just being bad faith for no reason,
is good. You didn't even know what an internal critique is. So I'm not being bad faith. I've been debating for 25 years. It's not bad faith.
It's completely fine to know what terms are, right?
Sure, but in terms of debate, that's like 101, knowing what an internal critique is.
I understand what like consistency checks are. I just didn't use the language internal critique, right? So if we want to go back an hour, you agreed to this idea of chatter, right? How we want to define concepts, agree to them so that we can talk about ideas.
Women prattle or chatter? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So if you agree to that, and then you agree to the terms, you can change them later. I'm just going to be good faith. You can change them later if you want to. Let's just go back to the terms again and narrow it down to what we can agree to of what feminism and patriarchy means. Because now, you're doing is...
I gave a very precise definition for patriarchy, right?
Sure, I did
And you
too.
gave a very loose definition as to what you think feminism is, which could encompass conceivably anything that helps women. And that's an ambiguity fallacy.
Then provide a different definition. Don't agree to it.
In my opening statement, I said that I believe feminism is a revolutionary philosophy that destroys society. It was brought about to change society in toto and ultimately to serve into oligarchical designs and people who, and I gave sources. You can read the Rockefeller's authorized biography. They have a whole discussion of Abby Rockefeller funding third wave feminism in Cell 16.
Sorry, how is this not just as ambiguous as the one? It's just a revolutionary
Just as ambiguous.
system?
I'm literally giving you the people who funded it and the actual names of the people, like Cell 16.
I don't know why you're appealing to. I don't know why you're appealing to authority right now. None of this matters.
No,
I'm
that's not an authority. That's the people involved. It's not an authority appeal.
Yeah, if the people
don't know what an
who you
authority
think
appeal is.
funded them is an authority for the
I
definition
gave the
of
people
feminism,
involved, like Abby Rockefeller,
that
who
would
was
be an
herself.
authority.
No, it's not.
Then why are you citing them?
It's a person who's in the movement. It's not just the funder.
Yeah, you're appealing to authority.
You
right
don't know
now.
what an appeal to. That's a fact. It's not an appeal to authority. You don't know what an appeal to authority is.
You are citing them
This is so
for
silly.
a definition of feminism.
Yeah, that's not an appeal to authority.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes,
you
it
don't
is.
know what an appeal to authority. If I said my position is true because I cite the Rockefellers, that would be an appeal to authority, and
You're
that's a
saying
fallacy.
This definition
this is an evidence
true
goofus.
because of the Rockefellers. If you want,
No, I'm not. I'm telling you
If
the
you wa-
history of the movement,
that
which
has
you don't
nothing-
even know
again,
about.
I've asked you to define feminism, and now
And
what
I'm
you're
giving
doing,
you the history of that movement,
I'm
which
asking
is
you for a
three
definition.
waves.
Why, I don't
Are
know-
there three waves of
Doofus,
feminism?
why can't you give me a definition?
Are there three waves of feminism?
There's four.
Okay. So there's 3.
Oh, you didn't know that? That's crazy.
So there are 3, correct?
There's 4.
Right, but that would mean there's also 3, even though there's a 4th, right?
That's true. 3 is less than 4.
I
Good
know
job,
that,
Jay.
but the fact that there's 4, there's still 3 that have happened, right?
Irrelevant to anything
Irrelevant.
modern
Wait a
feminism.
minute. Is that an appeal to authority?
What authority am I citing right now? I know
Well, you're
really
citing facts that you think are appeal
Which
to
authority have I cited? Name one. Name one authority I've cited, Jay.
You think-
Go. Name one authority I've
You
cited.
don't understand
Jay,
what,
name
I'm
one
making a
authority I've
joke.
cited.
I'm making a joke because
What's
you
the
think
authority I cited?
appealing to a fact is appeal to authority. Those are 2
That's
different
not
things.
true.
Yes,
In fact,
it is.
when you were citing
If I talk
Rockefeller,
about-
when you're
listen,
citing
this is
Rockefeller
so stupid.
as the definition for feminism,
No,
I'm
the
saying you're appealing
funder
to
is not
authority.
the definition, you idiot.
Then why are you appealing to them in any way?
to prove the history of the movement
Do you know
and
what an
what
appeal
it
to authority
teaches.
fallacy is? Brian,
Yes,
do you know what an
I
appeal
just
to
gave you the
authority fallacy is?
example.
Okay.
I've been debating for 25 years. I know what the appeal to authority is. That's one right there.
Okay, so
See?
when
That's
you,
the appeal to authority
when you
fallacy.
appeal to irrelevant people that sound authoritative
not
but
irrelevant.
aren't relevant, the history
Do you know
of
why?
feminism
Do you
isn't
wanna-
relevant to you giving me a definition of feminism
It is.
that I can operate
Is it
off
a
of.
historical movement?
Can you give me
Is it a
fucking
historical
definition?
movement?
Yeah, of course.
Then the history is relevant to the definition, you idiot.
Then give me the definition. You can do it,
Let's keep
Jay.
it nice if we can.
You can do it, Jay. I
Maybe
believe
this
in
is
you.
Like talking to a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Well, you're a big boy, so this should be really easy for you to find feminism. Go ahead.
Feminism is a historical movement that's concerned with the rights of women, including egalitarianism, the idea that women and men are equal. If we go back to Wollstonecraft, if we go back to the suffrage movement, if we go back to the notion of women not being married at certain ages as children. So the first wave wanted not just suffragism, but they also wanted to not have child brides and that kind of stuff.
I'm really proud of you. You got
But they
2
also
things.
listen.
One more.
I'm not. Shut up.
We're super
Shut
close.
up and let me finish.
We're
I'm
super
not
close.
done.
Yeah, I
I'm
believe
not
you.
done. They also wanted better work hours. They wanted women to have inheritance rights. They wanted women to be able to
so
get
labor
jobs
rights.
and they wanted women in the workforce and to be in positions that they didn't have. So they wanted certain social rights
Okay,
that
so they
women
want-
did, like voting, right, suffrage, right? Those are all first wave.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
This is your definition of feminism? Okay, I'm writing it down.
Are you serious?
I'm so dumb.
You
I'm
asked
even writing
for the
it down
history
for
of it.
I didn't ask you for the history. I asked you for a
You
definition.
said that it's historical.
Okay,
and I'm
rights
giving
of
you the
women,
movements.
I'm not asking for the history. I'm asking
You
you to,
said it is historical, so I have to go back to the people.
No,
You're so dumb that you can't conceive of a position apart from the people
I'll do something
who came
different.
up with the
Watch.
position.
I'll do so. Israel. I can define Israel without
What does this
going
have to
through
do-
the entire history of Israel. Feminism, while it
No, you
does
can't.
have,
Actually,
yes,
you
of
can't.
course you can.
No,
because
this is
for the
so
sake
silly
of conversation,
because you
we have to
admitted it's
agree
a
what
historical
construct is.
movement. Therefore, it can't be divorced from the people in history.
I'm not asking
Do you
to
think it
divorce
came
it.
out of the sky?
You're
Did it come
again,
into
this is a
people's
false
minds out of the
dichotomy.
sky
This
or
is a
from the
false
people?
dichotomy. You're doing a false dichotomy again.
What are you, dude? You don't
You're
even.
you're
this is
acting
so
like
crazy.
you're acting like you can't define it without the history. I'm telling
Correct. It's a historical movement by your own
you.
definition.
That doesn't mean that you can't make a definition for the word,
Yes,
so
you
we
have
can
to
just
go to
talk
the
about
people.
it.
Where do you think words come from? From people.
That
They
doesn't
don't
mean
drop
that-
out of the sky. They come
Jay,
from people.
Jay, I know you can do this. You can define a word without giving me a 5-minute
you
monologue
can't.
on the history.
No, you can't.
So there's no way for you to define feminism.
Would you go to a
without
dictionary?
history.
That's an appeal to authority.
It's not an appeal
Yes,
to
it is.
authority. Okay, there are appeal to authorities that are fallacious, and there are appeal to authorities that are
Oh,
non-fallacious.
like when I give the examples of the
Rockefeller
funders,
as
the
a
funders of
funder
it.
is not an appeal.
It's not
a
just a
legitimate-
funder. Abby was involved in Cell 16. She's not just a funder.
That doesn't matter. That
It
doesn't
does
mean,
because it came from them.
that doesn't mean that she's a relevant authority to cite.
The one who funded it and got it going at Chicago University is
Funded
not relevant.
portions of the third wave. Yes,
Correct.
that doesn't mean that
No,
she
it
gets
comes
to
out of her money.
No, that doesn't mean
millions
that-
of dollars at
again,
Chicago University.
That doesn't mean that she's the definer of feminism.
I didn't say she was. I said she's.
You cited her as a definer of feminism.
She's involved in the third
What's
wave
the
movement.
definition of
and-
feminism, Jay?
Oh
You
my
can do
gosh,
it.
you're so stupid.
I've got
You
3
can't
things from you so far.
even do a
Feminism
rational
equals
conversation.
rights of women. Men and women are
You
equal.
admitted-
Labor rights.
I
I've
mentioned
got 3 things. What
I
else is
mentioned
feminism? We can do this,
inheritance
Jay.
in terms of first wave feminism. I mentioned
yeah.
child age of marriage as another element of it.
Okay, so
in terms of the first wave.
Civil rights. Let's just call those civil rights.
That's not civil rights. It's oh my gosh, it's
How is that not
prior to
civil
the civil rights movement. You idiot.
That doesn't mean that it's not civil rights, Jay. I'm just trying to create a way to make this succinct so we can get a fucking definition because you don't like mine, which is fine.
I said yours.
That's why I'm just
yours
trying to
is
now
too
get a new
broad.
one. That's fine. Make your own.
I'm giving the historic. I don't need my own definition.
Yes,
it's
you
your
do.
position, you goofus.
No.
You debate
Jay,
positions
Jay,
like when you
Jay,
debated Jim Bob,
Jay.
and you tell people to define your position. This is how silly you are.
No, Jay.
You
I
gave a broad definition.
I gave you a definition, and you
Which
don't
is too
like
broad.
it. That's
No.
fine. Make your own definition, and then we can work from there.
I don't need to make a definition.
Yes,
It's
you
not
do.
my position.
If you have
It's a
rejected my definition, you now have to supply one.
Yes, I'm going to the people who came up with it. Correct.
Rockefeller didn't
historically.
come up with it.
I said Mary Wollstonecraft in my opening statement is one of the first feminists in modern society.
Do you want to supply a definition? This doesn't matter, Jay. Just make a definition.
So the people who came up with it don't matter.
They matter if you can get to getting a definition out of your fucking mouth. We've got
I've been giving you
We've got four elements of
Thank you.
feminism now. Okay, so we've got rights of women, like men and women are equal, egalitarianism, labor rights, and civil rights. Is there anything else you would like to add to that definition?
As we move into modernity, we get more radical versions of this, particularly with Cell 16, which becomes almost a revolutionary terrorist movement, which wants to engage in radical action and Skittles rights, shall we say. So they move into it being Skittles as well.
Okay, so
now, I don't care if you reject
trans rights.
I don't care if you reject that or accept that. Because I'm looking at this as a historical movement, because guess what? Feminism is a historical movement. That's what we're debating.
You might not believe me, Jay. I'm so disappointed about this conversation. I talked about chatter because I was interested in a good discussion.
You keep saying chatter doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I did an internal critique and you didn't know what that was. And then I start going to the history of feminism and then you're floundering.
Right now. You're just saying
I'm just
stuff
saying
right now.
stuff.
Yeah.
There we go.
So going to chatter, the reason I asked you about it is so that we could have a decently good conversation so that we weren't quibbling over the definition of words and we could actually engage in conversation. If the only way that you can debate for the last 25 years is to just quibble about semantics of words, I'm sorry, you're not a king debater. You're just bad faith.
You asked me for the last 30 minutes to define a word. So you're the one that's quibbling about semantics.
I'm
That's
not
semantics.
quibbling. I'm literally not quibbling. I am writing down your words.
Oh, so if you're writing it down.
I'm granting, it's not semantics because I'm just granting your definition.
I thought it was semantics. No, it's not.
It's not semantic debating because I'm not disagreeing with you on your definition. I'm literally begging you to just give me one. I'm begging you at this point because you don't like mine. So let's give yours.
I don't care what your definition is because all I have to do is critique your position internally and point out that it's so ambiguous.
You do have to care about my definition if you're going to do an internal critique. That's the fundamental of a fucking internal critique is that
now you do know about
definition.
So you just learned about an internal critique about 10 minutes ago and now you're going to lecture me on it.
You're a really good teacher, Jay. What can I say? So
the debate's over.
You do care about
She admitted she's learning.
You do care about feminism and my definition of it because you need it for the internal critique, which you've already acknowledged.
I don't care about it because
but now you've rejected my definition of feminism. So again, I know being mean to women is your fallback if you have nothing else to do.
Ad hominem now, so there we go.
It's not an ad hominem. I didn't say that you're
being mean to you.
No,
Who's being mean to you?
I didn't say you're wrong because you're being an asshole. I just said you're an asshole.
Now you're getting your feelings.
That's not an ad hominem. My feelings are fine.
It's not an ad hominem.
No. Insulting people and being mean is an ad hom. You should know this. You can Google it. Google it at home. An ad hom is when you use the insult of a person to discredit them. So if I said, Jay, you're wrong because you're mean, now I'm ad homing you. As a debate bro of 25 years, you should know your fallacies better. You've already been wrong about multiple fallacies.
Really?
And you can't, can't define feminism. Do you want to get there?
You've already admitted that I gave you four elements.
It seems like you have more. So 5 actually.
I think that
it seems
you
like
actually think
that you want to add.
You actually think like maybe a 100 IQ person that the way that you define something is you literally just look at a definition in a dictionary and then you just list it out and that's the definition of the word.
False.
That's
false.
Really?
I've never said
because
that.
I'm giving you the entire context of the history of feminism and you're saying, I need a fucking definition as we're working through the actual history of it and the definition of what it is.
to give me...
You admitted that it's a historical movement, didn't
That
you?
has nothing to do with you giving me a definition so that we can talk about it.
That it's a historical
Of course, Jay.
movement,
Yeah.
so the history has to do with it, you idiot.
I don't need the history for you to give me a definition, you
We
idiot.
have to go to the people who are the philosophers of it.
You can just define
Like
it.
Mary Wollstonecraft and her positions.
You can just define
like
it.
egalitarianism.
You can just define it so
I'm
we can
defining
fucking
it
move
for
on.
you. I've been defining it, and you just keep yapping and melting down over your notes.
Well, the issue is that it has taken me pushing you to be specific over and over for 45 minutes. We have 5 points now.
Because you don't
for
have
feminism.
anything other than this.
That's false.
How
I
does
gave
any
you
of
multiple
this
definitions.
prove your position that feminism is good for society?
Honestly,
As a feminist,
can we
you're
get there?
showing us that you're not good for society. So you're actually proving my point as you yap and argue. You're
That's actually a
proving my
great
point.
example of an ad
Yes,
hom.
that is actually
That is an ad hom,
That is an
actually.
but it's an illustrative ad hominem. Yes, correct.
That's true. It was a very creative ad hom. Okay, so we have 5 points that you would like to define feminism. Is there any other points that you want to define feminism with?
Yes,
Is there
the
anything
people
else?
who funded that also said
Yeah.
that they like the movement because it destroys the nuclear family, gets women in the workforce, taxes the other half of the population, and reduces the population because there's less families.
How do you want to summarize that?
Why do I have
destruction
to?
of
You
nuclear
can't remember
family?
what I just
So
said?
feminism
You can't
is-
remember 4 sentences I just said?
No, I can remember. I just want to you're you're just very yappy, and so I'd like to
I'm
make
yappy.
it succinct. Yes,
I'm yappy.
to give me a definition, you've had to give me an entire century's worth of history, even
You mean,
though.
like when you admitted that it's a historical movement, so it can't be
Here's the
it
thing,
can't
Jay.
be divorced from the
You
historical
know what you
people?
could have done? You could have just said to me, so that we can move forward with this conversation. Feminism is
Yeah,
rights.
but I'm not going to
Is
grant
rights
you.
of women, men
it's
and
a
women
debate,
are equal, labor
so I'm
rights,
not going to
civil
grant
rights,
you
and trans rights.
simple answers in a debate.
Why
to
wouldn't
help
you just define a word?
I
Well,
don't
if we
owe
can,
you
if
a
we
definition.
Can, maybe we could avoid some of the insults, and if we can, also allow people to finish their thought. Let's try to.
Okay, are you
not
happy?
do interruptions? But go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
So
are
I
you?
want to know how any of this helps your case to prove feminism is good for society.
Well, we can get there now that we've defined feminism. So destruction of nuclear family is another one that you would like to add to
Sure.
the definition of feminism.
That's why the people who fund it matter, is because they say that.
Okay, I would argue that the destruction of nuclear families is not inherent to most feminist movements and is bad. So I reject that part of your definition.
So the people who want that in society and say that it does that don't matter. Because you have
They're not the feminism that I'm fighting
because you have a definition that is so elastic to make it anything that you think helps women. And that's why I've said you've already lost the debate,
I was
because
pretty
you're elastic.
specific. The
It's not specific.
empowerment.
That's why I asked you
empowerment
that
of
open
women and
statement.
promotion of femininity. So empowerment means things
That
like
is
removing obstacles.
ambiguous.
And promotion of
It's
femininity would be
ambiguous.
like making feminine traits viewed as respect-worthy.
Like submitting to authority in men? Is that a feminine trait?
No, I would not say so.
So it's not clear. It's ambiguous.
I would say
so it's,
submission is.
you have to
feminine.
define it.
I would say submission's feminine, but I don't think
to-
it's to men specifically. No.
Oh, okay.
It would be like to any authority, right?
To any authority.
Yeah.
Are most authority men?
A lot of them are, but some are
So it
women.
would be to men.
Nope, it would be to authority. But men aren't a class. Men aren't a class.
But most authorities are men, and they are submitting to that, right?
So
So it would be. to
yeah,
men.
but the idea. Okay, you love semantic
wow.
fights.
No, it's called a debate.
I can do that too. If you want me to just like mock you every time you stutter, we can have a super fun
It's
conversation.
just how debates work. I'm sorry.
Mocking people
Rhetoric
when
is
they
part of-
stutter is not-
Rhetoric is part of debate. Yes,
This
it
is not rhetoric.
It
This is just
rhetoric.
you being
Have you ever
performative.
watched an Oxford Union debate? They make fun of each other.
I'm fine with you making fun of each other.
That's what I've been doing.
Okay. Would you like to have a productive conversation too, or do you want to just? Do you want? We
I'm
can
having a
circle the
great
drain.
time.
If you,
I'm having a great time.
that's fine. We can just continue to circle the drain.
And how does this prove feminism is good for society?
Okay, so I already said I would reject the destruction of nuclear family. I don't think it's central to most feminism. I think most,
Was
especially,
it central to Cell 16?
it sounds like it was, but I would say most fourth wave feminists, for example, are not very pro destruction of the nuclear family. In fact, there's like an entire like barefoot pregnant movement within the fourth wave that is very much about embracing being pregnant, being motherhood, and like promoting that as a good thing.
Is that the attitude that most feminists in society have?
I would say a lot of young feminists are
But
directly.
are they the most?
I wouldn't.
No, they're not.
Most also don't want to destroy the nuclear family.
Well, in academia and in
Most
society
feminists
in general,
want to get married and have kids.
does this worldview promote, in general, in society, in academia, and in the corporate world, the destruction of the family, or does it
No.
help it?
It tends to promote it. Yeah, they want women to be mothers who can also
Feminism promotes women in society in general.
I would say fourth
Women
wave
being
feminism is very pro-mother.
No,
yeah.
I asked you about the majority of feminism today.
Most feminists are fourth wave.
That's institutionalized.
Yeah, most
How do you know-
institutional
really?
academics are fourth wave.
And they want people to have kids.
Yes.
They're not anti-natalists.
No, some of them are, but most of them are
In
not.
institutions?
Yes.
No, that's crazy.
I don't know what
That's
to tell you.
ridiculous.
I've been reading lots of fourth wave
I've been in
feminists.
academia. I've been in institutions.
Me too.
I've never met a feminist in academia or in institutions who thinks that there should be more people and more kids. They all believe in depopulation, the ones that I've met.
That's crazy. I've just met lots of feminists that don't believe that. And regardless, those feminists who are like basically death cult feminists, I'm not interested in advocating for their worldview.
That's fine.
I don't have to own them.
But the history of feminism,
Just like you don't have
and
to own, like, Protestants or
Most
something.
feminism, right? So you've got a nuanced feminism, I guess, is your take, right?
I just have like a pretty traditional like fourth wave feminism.
Okay. So, but it's not historic feminism, right? Or is it first wave?
It's fourth wave,
So it's tied to history?
of course, because there's
Oh,
waves.
so it is tied to history.
Yeah, but the waves,
Oh, but
the
a minute
essentials
ago-
of the
but you said
waves
it
is that
wasn't a
there's.
minute ago.
I've never ever said that feminism isn't tied to history. You've just made that up.
I think we could go back about 20 minutes. So you can do what I do. You know, we go back 20 minutes where you said that the history doesn't matter.
I
And
said
you need
for
a
your
definition.
definition, it doesn't matter. You can hold
you
frame,
just
Jay.
literally
You can do this.
you have double
Jay,
think
hold
going
your
on.
frame.
Have you read 1984?
You can hold
Have
your
you read
frame. I
1984?
have.
Right. Do you know what
Yes.
double think is?
Yes.
It's the ability to contradict within a couple minutes.
I didn't
and
contradict.
It just goes,
If you remember, we can roll back the tape. We were talking about defining.
think
and I cared-
definitions are
Can I finish
relative?
my thought, or are you just going to interrupt me?
because I'm trying to.
Can I
I'm trying
finish
to-
my thought?
I'm trying to hone
Can I
in
finish my
on
thought?
what this weird mistake is because it's weird.
Guys,
Because-
if we can at least, we'll let the insults go. Okay, if you guys want to insult each other, we'll allow that. But at least let each other finish
Okay.
their thoughts. Go ahead.
Okay. The reason that we went into the history and why I said I don't care about the history is I was asking for a functional definition so we could move past that part of the conversation. I always acknowledge that history was part of the feminist movement and it's tied to
Yeah,
it.
I reject
just-
that there is a definition divorced from history.
I've never said that there's a definition divorced from history. I said I don't
You
need
did
the
because
history.
you
I
asked
said
me.
I don't need
you
the
asked
history
me-
lesson. I
you
don't
asked me
need the
for that
history
divorce-
lesson.
You
gotta
asked
let
me for
finish,
that.
Jay. You gotta let me finish,
You
Jay.
asked me because you're lying. You asked
I'm
me for
not
that
lying.
divorce. You said divorce from history. What is your definition? That's
I
what you said.
Yeah, I didn't want the history
Thank you.
lesson.
So you just contradicted yourself.
No, I
Again.
didn't contradict myself.
You are
Jay.
a machine of
You're
contradiction.
desperate. You're so desperate. You're like, God, how do I get this win? I asked for you to stop giving me all of the history and just give me a definition so we can
I don't
move the fuck
accept
on.
that there is a definition divorce from history, and you just admitted that. You
So
goofus.
you don't have the brain capacity to define something without a 5-minute monologue about the
You
history.
just admitted you can't do that.
Define
you idiot.
Israel. Are you going to go back 3,000
I
years
will,
to define
correct,
it?
yes, because it's a ancient historical nation. Yes,
So you
correct.
can't define Israel without giving me a 10-minute monologue.
It's a false analogy because feminism is a
not a false
modernist
analogy.
movement. It's a modern movement.
That doesn't
it's not
matter.
an ancient civilization.
That doesn't matter.
It does matter.
No, the
You
extent,
just saying it
the
doesn't matter
extent
just
of the
shows your
historical
lack
time
of
is not
intellect.
at all a false analogy. Extent
You
being
are
different.
melting down right now because you contradicted yourself
I'm melting
within
down
2
because
minutes.
you said that you had 25 years of debate history and you can't.
And you
can't get a single fallacy
Look at
correct.
you. You're melting down.
You said
You're
a false,
spiraling.
How is that a false
You're
analogy?
melting down.
How is that a false analogy, Jay?
Because it's a modern movement. It's not an ancient civilization.
What does that have to do with anything when it comes to
Because
comparing
you
history
contradicted
for
yourself.
a definition?
And in debates, contradictions
Contradicting
are
myself
what
has
make
nothing
you
to do
lose.
with the false analogy. How is that a false
That's
analogy?
how you lose the debate, correct.
How is it a false
Contradicting
analogy?
is where you
so
lose
you
the debate.
can define Israel without giving me the centuries of history. Is that what you're telling me?
I didn't say that. You just said that.
You said it was a false analogy.
You
So what was the false analogy?
you
I never said that.
You said that. So you're yapping because you got caught.
I didn't get caught.
You did.
Again.
You did. You said that history.
No.
You said history doesn't matter. Give me your definition, and then you just said history matters. It's part of the definition.
I didn't.
You contradicted
I did not say history matters as part of.
You
no,
did. Yes, you
Jay,
did.
Part of debating. Part of debating is holding frame, right? Would you agree?
Like when you did that, is that holding frame or what is that?
No, that was making fun of you, obviously.
Okay, right.
So part of debating is holding frame.
Like putting dongs in your mouth. Is that holding frame? I don't understand.
No, that's
like,
funny.
Is it?
Like we're
Is
all
it?
laughing about it. Yes, it's
Or are
funny.
we laughing at you?
Kind of the same thing. That's kind of what performers do, right?
Oh.
Yeah. So part of debating is holding frame.
Is any of this going to prove that feminism was good for society? Because
We
the more that
literally
you argue,
can't get there because you
the
are
more that
still
you
quibbling.
argue, you make
over
my case.
I'm
Thank you,
not
by the
making
way.
your case. Again, just
You
an
are.
ad hom. You
but
love
it's funny.
fallacies.
That's a
my
joke.
favorite thing about you is that you cite fallacies constantly. You don't know what they mean, and you can't define them properly.
Like how history is not part of feminism,
How
but
is it a false analogy to compare Israel, defining Israel?
Because it's
and
an
defining
ancient
feminism.
nation state.
Why
and
does the-
feminism is a modern political, social, revolutionary movement. They don't compare.
So why does the extent of the length
And
of
you
history make them
admitted-
disanalogous?
You've already lost the debate because you admitted that the definition can't be divorced from the history, and then you said the opposite. That means you've massively contradicted yourself within the last 5 minutes.
Again, you're just making shit up. I'm glad that the made-up narrative.
everybody
of the story,
heard you,
Okay,
so that's
I'll do
fine.
this. Jay just lost the debate because he's strawmanning me and putting words in my mouth that didn't happen. Wow, I'm really good at debating. Do you want to go back to the actual conversation?
Sure.
Okay, so why is it falsely analogous when you're saying that to define words, you must include the entire history to define the word? Why is it disanalogous to compare feminism to Israel? I asked you to define feminism, and I asked you to define Israel,
I have no
and I
idea
asked you if you
what
could define
Israel
Israel
has to do-
without
this
the
is the
3
craziest
centuries of
debate
history.
ever.
And you said, well, it's different. It's a false
Correct,
analogy.
it's a false analogy.
Why is it a false analogy?
Because they're two totally different things. And you already admitted that feminism is a historical movement and that it can and can't be divorced from the history.
So is Israel.
That's making my point, you goofus.
No, it's
Yes,
not.
it is.
I'm saying you can obviously define Israel without going through 3 centuries, which you agreed to. That's why you
It's
don't.
a false analogy
You,
because
you
it's
won't define Israel with the 3
It's an
centuries because it's
ancient
just
nation.
long. It's just long.
It's an ancient
Whereas
nation state.
modern feminism only has 100 years. So I
mean,
can
this-
give the history of that, but I can't give the history of Israel to define it because it's too long, essentially. That's your argument. That's what. Yes, that is your argument. It is not falsely analogous. And also,
keep
comparing
yapping, it
2
makes
different
my
things
point,
is the
please.
point
Keep
of
talking.
fucking
The
analogies.
more that you talk, it makes my whole case here that feminism is a net negative for society. Thank you for representing
Honestly,
feminism, by the way.
all you're doing
Thank
is
you
making
for
me be like,
representing
maybe the
feminism.
Radfems are right and men got to be out of power because they cannot keep up. If this is what like 2
Yeah, we
masters
can't keep
and a
up, even though
philosophy
you
degree
literally-
do,
right, you literally
honestly,
contradicted yourself within-
I think the
within
conservatives
5
are right.
minutes.
Don't go to college, guys. You're
called
going to end up like
doublethink.
this. Not good.
I don't recommend people go to college, by the way, because you are the people that teach at college. So you're
I teach
actually,
at college.
you're like the college professors I debated, the women I debated, you're like them. So they should go to college if you want them to be in your position, right?
No, but if they end up anything like you, they should definitely not go to college. You're like, I had a philosophy degree and I don't know what fallacies are.
Did I say that?
Basically,
Was that a cut down?
yeah.
Good one. Try again.
This would be a perfect moment to read a couple chats here.
Okay.
We have Kat, who gifted 50 memberships. Thank you so much, Kat. Guys, W's in the chat for Kat. Thank you for the gifted 50 whatever memberships. Robert Tanner, thank you for the gifted 50 whatever memberships. Thank you so much. We also have Rachel Wilson in the building. Thank you for the gifted 5 memberships. Really appreciate it. And then we have a couple chats coming in here through Streamlabs. Let me get those pulled up. If you guys want to get a message in, it's $99 and up. We have Intel Wild. Oh, it's coming in as a TTS.
Intel Wild donated $100. Not so bright. Do you like BDSM because you are getting spanked by Jay?
Ah, classic. When you can't defeat a woman, you just have to sexually
Like when you
degrade
do
her
the
and make a joke
dongs in
out
your
of it.
mouth, like that. Is that a good example of what you're talking about?
When I'm sexually
I can't
degrading
defeat a
myself?
woman, so you put dongs in your mouth
No,
because
I
it's
said
funny.
you can't defeat a woman without sexually degrading her and then making a joke.
Like
out
when
of
you put
it.
dongs in your mouth. Is that
was
sexually degrading?
myself. That was myself.
Oh, by yourself. Okay, right. So it's all subjective, like relativism.
Usually you can make jokes about yourself that other
Do you believe in
people probably
relativism
shouldn't.
too?
Yeah, I do.
Really? Mm-hmm. Is it self-refuting?
No.
Is relativism true?
But depends on what you mean by true.
Is everything relative?
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's like subjective.
It
can't
means the
conflate
same
it.
thing. Yeah,
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
No, it does
Something being
not.
totally relative means that it is subjective.
No. That's,
It
I'm
does.
sorry, that is like a philosophy 101.
No, it's correct. Philosophy 101, you would learn that if something is completely relative, then it's purely subjective. It's the same.
No.
Yes, it is. It's the
No,
same,
you're
it's the
conflating
same
subjectivism
content.
to cultural relativism at best.
I know the difference between the
opposite
two.
of
It doesn't-
relativism?
Your position is.
What do you think the opposite of relativism is?
You've already, now that you've admitted that everything is relative
What do you think it
to
is?
you.
What do you think it is?
It's-
The opposite of
Well, there's
relativism.
epistemic relativism, there's cultural relativism, there's ethical relativism.
What's broadly the opposite of relativism?
Everything is relative to your vantage point, your perspective.
What's the opposite of it?
Perspectivalism.
You
No,
don't
it's
know,
not.
do you?
You're an idiot.
It's absolutism. It's not objectivism.
Relativism is not absolutism.
No, the opposite of relativism is moral
It's
absolutism.
objectivism.
No, it's
yes,
not.
Yes, it is.
No, so the
You're
opposite
an idiot.
You don't
You've
know
never
anything about
had. Have you?
philosophy.
I don't know
That's
philosophy.
crazy. That's
Right.
crazy.
I've debated all the top atheists and philosophers, and you
I'm
don't
not going to
know.
lie. I didn't expect that. You should definitely
The opposite
know
of
this.
relativism is objectivism.
It's absolutism.
It means the same thing.
No,
The
it does
yes,
not.
it does.
No, it does not.
You have a problem with words
That's
that you
crazy.
think that two different words can't mean the same thing.
Okay, moral absolutism is when you can apply things universally. Objectivism
Correct.
is that something can be like capital T true. These are
You can
not
use
the same thing.
You can use the terminology. You're arguing
These
over
are
an
not the
idiot.
same
Yes,
thing.
they are.
No, they're not.
Moral objectivism. What is that?
Moral objectivism is believing that there's like a capital T true that you
Correct.
can find. Yeah, that's not the same thing as absolutism.
No, it's not.
Kant is more
moral
like an absolutist.
objectivism. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I do.
Moral objectivism is that there are moral absolutes. It's that simple.
No.
Yes. What do you mean no?
That's crazy. Can I get more water?
So now she wants to run and get water.
No, I'm not running. I'm actually just, I'm gobsmacked.
Oh, there's some under.
Oh, yeah.
there's
Right,
some-
because
I'm genuinely
because you
gobsmacked
have a
that the Phil
basically
student
you
doesn't
have
know this.
essentially
That's okay.
you have an elementary school level education, and you're
Yep.
actually debating people who actually
Which
know what philosophy is.
crazy because despite my little education, you still don't know what relativism is versus like absolutism and objectivism. That's fine. We can move
I've
on.
debated the dude from the Objectivist Foundation, the Ayn Rand Foundation, so I'm pretty sure I know.
Again, then you would
And
know that
he presents the
objectivism.
position. Do you understand that a word can mean different things in different contexts? So if I say that something is morally objective, or that it's morally absolute, or that it's not relative or subjective, it all means the same thing, even though it's different words. Did you know that?
That's crazy. Okay.
That's crazy. That words can mean the same
Yes,
thing is
that,
crazy?
That you don't have any concept of the philosophical compass is crazy to
The
me.
philosophical compass.
Yes.
do a couple chats.
So meme level philosophy. Yeah.
It's not meme level
It is a
philosophy.
meme. It's a meme.
It's not
meme level philosophy because you
Okay.
thought that words didn't mean the same thing.
Okay.
We have a chat coming in here from Robert. One sec, guys. Let's get that pulled up. There it is. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate
Robert
it.
donated $200. Hey Brian, comment on this discussion. Bloomberg just reported 2 days ago that for the first time ever, white men are slightly now less than half of board members at S&P 500 companies. Progress on GDP?
Thank you, Robert. Do you guys want to discuss that or?
Not. I don't know if that's even true. If that's true, I feel
Maybe it's like
neutrally about
DEI.
it.
Okay.
It depends on like why it's the case, right? I think like white men in general are being like pretty shittily treated by society right now. I think there's like a fair bit of like persecution. So I suspect that the reasons behind that is bad. But maybe it's neutral. But probably it's bad. But maybe it's neutral.
All right. We have 3 other chats. Unless Jay, you wanted to weigh in on that one?
No, I agree. It's bad. Yeah.
Sure. We have Whatever Fan. Thank you, Whatever
Whatever fan
Appreciate it.
donated $100. I'm enjoying Jay Barbecue cooking her puppy cheeks better than Gordon Ramsay like a donkey.
Okay.
They like my cheeks. That's all I heard.
We have.
You got cooked, is what they said. I know,
They also
you
said
can't.
I'm
I know you
cute.
can't
They
hear
also said I'm
something.
cute.
Yeah.
There was a nice one that came through about you.
Oh, I saw.
All right, we have Grandma Sweaters coming in here in just a moment. Grandma's Sweaters, excuse me.
Grandma's Sweaters donated $100. Erudite that makes no sense. Feminism is a populist movement where each rep in history interprets the definition. Feminism hold ancient beliefs and utilize history as foundation for their beliefs.
Yep.
Okay. It's not a refutation of anything that I've said.
Right.
If you
Right,
guys
but I
want to
understand
engage,
that you can't understand
if you want
objective
to engage with
argumentation.
me,
Right.
I'm right here. But
Right.
if you want to keep fighting like some,
But you're
ghost
arguing
the
in
room,
yourself,
you go
in
for
your
it.
head. It's like a hamster wheel running, and you're
I'm
not
not.
actually in the debate.
I've
That's why
defined
the whole
feminism
chat
multiple
is cooked.
times. I did a lot of
But
labor
did
to
you
get
hear
you to
my?
define
I bet you
feminism.
couldn't restate my internal critique, could you?
Of me?
Yeah.
It was something about how you think that I'm like self-defeating because you think that my definitions necessarily like contradict each other, which they don't. It was just a false dichotomy.
No, that wasn't the internal critique, but good try.
Okay. Do you want to remind me?
You got more?
Yeah, we have Rachel Wilson. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate
Wilson
it. Thank you.
donated
Thank you.
$100. The most merciful thing that the large family does to one of its infant members is kill it. Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, first wave feminist. Feminism is intrinsically anti-natalist.
Yep.
I just disagree.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you, Rachel Wilson. Appreciate that.
It's almost like there's lots of camps to a large movement.
So it's elastic. Exactly. Thank you.
Yep. To some degree, yeah, we would agree that there's heterogeneity within any movement.
Right. So it can be defined the way you need it at whatever point in the
No,
debate,
I
right?
defined it really clearly. Like
Very
really clearly.
broadly so that you could move it later. And it
And
didn't
why'd
work.
you agree
I'm sorry
to
it didn't work.
Why'd you agree to it?
Because I was setting you up to lose later. That's why.
Oh, it was an 8D chess plan.
Correct.
And then it took
And
you
you fell.
45 minutes to define it later.
No, I just let you sink your own, dig your own hole
Okay,
after
Jay.
45 minutes.
Whatever you need to tell yourself to win.
I bet you 95% of the chat's going to agree with me. What do
I'm
you want to bet?
sure that this
Because
chat
everybody's
agrees
dumb.
with you.
Oh, really?
No,
so
no,
everybody in
I-
the chat's dumb. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't say that. I said I'm sure chatters agree with you. I just don't.
But you think that my arguments are dumb, so they're dumb.
I'm not super interested in what chatters have to say. Viewers are a very different
But
breed.
optics and who won the debate is judged by the audience.
Yeah, but the audience isn't just chatters, right? It's also viewers, and these are not the same person.
I bet the comments are going to say otherwise.
I'm sure the comments on a very right-leaning, decently Eastern Orthodox that has already accepted most of your presuppositions as a show
Right-leaning
are
or
going to agree
right-leaning?
with you.
What?
Right-leaning.
Right-leaning?
Yeah, I'm sure that they're going to agree with you, but that doesn't mean that you've won, right? Just like if I put this on my channel and then all of my left-leaning audiences said I won, that's not evidence that I won, obviously.
Are you sure?
Yeah, obviously. That would be like a super
Because
selection bias.
debates are for audiences.
Sure. Did you listen to anything I just said? What's a selection bias?
Well, it's when you choose the evidence based on what you want.
That's not a selection bias. That's called.
Well, you're talking about audiences, and like my audience would like my stuff. So if they like me, then I think I won because my audience liked me. So I selectively chose the audience, is what you're saying.
No. Okay. No. So you know what? Never mind.
no,
A-
right.
You're wrong.
No, that's what it is.
It's crazy.
So
you don't
basically,
know what any of these words mean. You've really impressed people.
Like
a selection
how-
bias
like how the word
in
objective
science,
just means
so
absolute
a selection
in the
bias in
same
science
sense?
means that like a naturally arising population that you are testing might end up having some emergent trait that you think is a construct true of that group when actually you've already set up the prerequisite methodology to find that trait within it. So my audience is going to like my shit more and your audience will like your
That's
shit
literally
more.
what I just said.
Yeah, but the issue is
yeah,
that you were
yeah, but that's what I just
you were
said.
defining.
That's what I just said.
No, you said that you were
That's what
selecting
I
for
just
it.
defined, you idiot.
No.
You're stupid. Like, I literally just defined the same thing that you said.
Do you think that when you call me stupid, you win?
No, it's a fact.
Like, what's the
No,
purpose
it's
behind
factually demonstrating what is the case.
it? Again, do you think that
Because
you're winning by
you
calling
literally
me
give the
stupid?
same definition I did. I don't care.
No, the issue is that you were doing the what's it called when you
Oh,
cherry
I thought you knew the
evidence?
fallacies. I thought you knew the fallacies.
I do. I just don't
but
remember
you
the
don't. But you
term for
don't.
it.
You don't. Because you didn't know what an internal critique was either.
Do you remember what the
what?
word is for when you selectively you cherry pick your evidence? What's the word for that?
Well, there's two fallacies. There's the sharpshooter fallacy and the gambler's fallacy. So you might be referring to either of those.
No.
Just cherry picking fallacy?
It's not cherry picking fallacy. It's got
She
like
doesn't
a really
even know the
common nerd.
fallacies.
I do.
No, you don't.
Yes.
So
But it's crazy.
What's the gambler's fallacy, if you know the fallacy?
What's a false analogy?
What's the gambler's fallacy?
I don't know.
You just said you knew the fallacy.